I'm John Aldred, VP of Product Management, and we're going to take the next 40 minutes or so to look at an overview here of Aqira. But just to start out, as an introduction, with all that you hear from senior executives and the media about digital transformation, Industry 4.0 and big data, you'd be forgiven for thinking that engineering happens something like this these days. It's all holograms and 3D glasses. Well, the reality is perhaps more like this. There's still a lot of engineering that takes a lot of hard work. There's a lot of manual effort, and there's reliance on a few key individuals in a lot of organizations. From what I'm seeing, talking to customers, there's still way too much to do. Timelines are too short, and there's not enough resources. And so even the thought of reinventing how you do things on top of that is just too much of a distraction. But if you were to stop and consider, what is slowing you down? What are the challenges you have? And there are some real challenges right now in the way, different engineering companies in like autonomous vehicles and different technical challenges that you have. But if you were to slow down and think, well, okay, so what is slowing us down? What are the bottlenecks? Where is there time or resource wasted? I wonder what you'd come up with. Well, perhaps as an expert, if you're the expert working in doing simulation, doing data analysis, analyzing data from the proving ground, maybe as the expert, what if you could actually focus on more value-added engineering? How much of your time is spent doing routine tasks or administrative tasks or things that take up your time rather than actually focusing on the challenges at hand? What if you could enable more engineers in your organization to perform those routine analysis tasks? Maybe even product engineers. How about if they could do more of simulation tasks, the routine tasks? Now, that may require you to actually be able to capture the corporate knowledge that you have and reuse it. And what if you could actually automate more of the tasks that you have? Maybe just straightforward automation of all the analysis that you have to do. Maybe that would help. What if you could avoid reinventing the wheel for analysis techniques in different departments? Sometimes you have an analysis technique that's being used in Germany and a very similar but different techniques being used in the US. And then you have to try and figure out whose results are right, or how you compare them, or what the differences are. What about if you could standardize analysis techniques? How much time would that save in terms of actually being able to get the job done? And perhaps as a different tack, as from an IT perspective, if you're running software packages, there's lots of different, obviously, simulation tools, a lot of different analysis packages that are being used. From an IT perspective, that's also a lot of time and effort to manage all those. So what if you could reduce the time and cost of software deployments and new versions? So this falls into the area of what we call sort of democratization. How do we make it easier to get analysis tools into the hands of more engineers for them to be able to use it? And we'll be touching on that today as we talk about this product, Aqira. Before we do that, just a word of introduction of who we are. Prensia is a brand you may be becoming more familiar with. So Prensia is a division of HBM, and you may be more familiar with the software brands, Encode software for durability, and also Reliasoft for reliability analysis software, Weibel++, etc. So those are the software brands that you may be familiar with. But Prensia does more than that. We provide a lot of training and services to our customers, both training on the software and also services such as materials testing. We have our own materials testing laboratory, and we also provide either in-house or on-site services to help customers, again, both with durability and reliability services. So that's who we are. And today we're going to be focusing on a relatively new product from Prensia, which is called Aqira. And we'll be talking about three main things today as part of this presentation. First one is how to manage and share analytical processes. So how you can do a better job, how you can take all the hard work that you're doing and help standardize that and share that within your organization. Secondly, we're going to talk about how to create easy-to-use apps. Again, I touched on that as we were talking there about democratization. How do you take what might be a complex analysis process and package it up in such a way that other engineers, maybe less expert engineers, are then able to use that analysis process with some confidence that they're going to be able to make the right decisions as a result. And finally, one of the other benefits of Aqira is some of the licensing advantages that we provide. So there are some deployment advantages, but there are also some licensing advantages in terms of how to cost-effectively use this software across the organization. So we'll take a look at that, and some of those things are also new for 2018. So getting started, if you're familiar with Encode software, you're familiar probably with the concept of flows. So these are, as you see on the screenshot there, a graphical layout of an analysis process. In the Encode software, you create an analysis process by putting together different building blocks we call glyphs. So those analysis building blocks are put together in a graphical process that we call a flow. And those flow files are a great step in what we talked about there at the beginning, which is encapsulating a process. It's not just a single step. You've got a multi-step process for the analysis that you're encapsulating. You're able to save that and then reuse that. So that's a great step in managing processes. But Aqira extends that by enabling you to then manage and easily share version-controlled flow files and in a central place. So Aqira helps extend that flow concept by helping to manage those flow files. And so in Aqira, you have these version-controlled processes in a central location. And then you can also store, together with those flows, additional information and documentation with each process. Additionally to that, not only are you able to do that in a web-based environment, you're able to manage those flows centrally, but also you're able to then actually run Encode directly in that web browser. So we have something called remote Encode, which means you no longer need to have Encode installed on your desktop if you don't wish. You can actually run Encode that's running remotely on the server and have all the same interactive capabilities, run the software just like you would on your desktop, but through a central web-hosted environment. So the flows that are stored in Aqira can be opened in this version of Encode and used in a browser without you having to have Encode installed on your own computer. So let me stop right there and just give you a quick flavor of that, because it probably helps you to actually see what I'm referring to. So if I jump out here and go to Aqira. So Aqira is a web environment. It's here I'm using Chrome. You can also use IE or Firefox. And I'm just going to log into this server. I'm actually based in the US. I'm actually logging into this server that's actually hosted in England. So you could use this environment globally within your organization to help share and standardize. So I'm going to log in. And then when you log into the system, it's going to show you a personalized dashboard of information and results that are relevant to you. So it might be results from analysis that you recently run, things that you wanted to see on your dashboard. But I'm going to go on the left-hand side here on the main menu. I'm going to go to what's called the flow list. And the flow list is a list of flows that have been submitted by engineers into the system. And I can then search for the flow that I'm interested. I could say filter by a particular user. And see who owns a certain flow. Or I can, for example, let's say I wanted to find a flow that contains a specific analysis function, a particular glyph. I can use a filter and say, find me something that contains, say, the relative damage spectrum glyph. Apply. Here's a process it's found that helps me calculate relative damage spectra. I can get some more details on that, information about it, what versions are available, what attachments are available. That might be, for example, additional documentation or example files. And then once I've found the flow that I want, I can click this open button here. It's going to open a tab in the browser, and it's going to start up GlyphWorks, in this case, running on the server, but now fully hosted in my web browser. So in this way, I can interact with this just as if I would be running Encode on my desktop. And so, for example, I could just click on a file, view it, I can zoom in. It's a fully interactive web-hosted version of Encode. And as you'd expect, I can then drag and drop, run this process, and there's a simple process that's calculated the relative damage for different frequency ranges in the different channels in this file. So standardized process that I could be locked down and then distributed. Obviously, that's just one process that I've used. I exit that. One thing that is obviously very important is that you can also just start from scratch. So there's a new flow button up here in the top right, and that opens up a new tab. It's going to start up Encode, and it's a clean sheet of paper. So I can literally, just as I would on my desktop, I'm going to drag and drop analysis glyphs onto here and create my own process. And look at the results. Look at the frequency content. Simple process. And once I've created a process, I can then actually save it back into Aqira. So I can then submit that, put that straight into the database for others to use. I can share it then with others, as I'll show you in a moment. I'm just going to discard that change. So here we have a centralized list of these analysis processes. You can control who can see them. There's an option here to then take a process and then share it. So I can share that with either individual users or groups of users. And that's showing the use of Encode with Aqira purely through the web browser. However, most of you right now are currently using Encode. You'd be using Encode on your desktop, and you can also work exactly the same way here. So for example, I can say download the file, and I can then click on that process. So in this case here, open up an analysis process, and now I can run this analysis process locally on my own desktop. So that then supports the current way of working that you may have, where you've got a centralized version control version of a flow, but you can now run that using your desktop version of the software. So you can run it either way. So that gives you a sort of brief introduction to how Aqira provides a centralized way of managing flows. One of the questions we often get when when we show this to customers is where are those data files that I need to use for running the analysis on the server side? And that can be any really can be any network drive that's accessible to the server. And at 2018, we also provide a remote files capability within Aqira directly, so you can see those files. You've got a default working area when you log into the system. You can then upload new files into that area, manage those files, rename them, etc. on that remote server. So that makes that easy to see what the available files are that you have. But as I say, you can actually point then to any files within Aqira that are on the accessible network drive to the server itself. Okay, that's just a brief introduction to managing flows. And as I showed briefly there in the demo, once you've created a flow, you can then make that accessible to anyone in your system. So you can just say, I want to make that available to everyone, or I want to make that available to a certain group, whereas a certain group of users, or literally I can pick individuals and say, I want to make this flow version available to these individuals. And once you've shared that, it's then, again, version controlled. You can then create new draft versions that you can play with, and then before you release that to others within your organization. And when you share it, you can decide what level of access different users within your organization have to those flows. Maybe you can just see that they exist. Maybe you can open them. Maybe you can download them, as we showed there. You know, that's an option. Or you can make people only be able to run that through the web. So that's some of the permissions that you have in order to control the access to those flows. But some flows, some analysis processes can get quite complicated. You can have a lot of glyphs. There can be a lot of different inputs. There can be a lot of different analysis options that can be in the different steps within the process, and so they can get quite complicated to use. So the concept of an app is the ability to provide an easy-to-use front end for what could be a very sophisticated analysis process. Apps enable you to ask a few simple questions that are relevant, hide all the options that you don't want to touch, and provide the results in a more intuitive and graphical manner. So instead of having a complex flow like this, you just ask a few simple questions and then be able to show the results clearly, hiding all the complexity. So apps are all about making an analysis easy to use. And in Aqira, we have this ability to create what we call a custom page, where the author of the app has the ability to design these interactive pages that the user sees when running an app. So the layout of that page is defined using a graphical page designer, using a drag and drop interface where you drag on to what the different parts of the interface that you want to show. And all that's done by dragging and drop, and there's no scripting required. So really, if you can make a flow, if you can make the analysis process, then you can design an app. It's very important that this is aimed at the expert engineer who created the analysis process, so that he himself can then also create these apps. So it doesn't require a third party, it doesn't require IT department development, it doesn't require you to speak to an external vendor to create these vertical applications. You're actually able to do that yourself with simple interface and not having to do custom scripting just to put a front end upon an analysis. So let's again take a look at how that works in practice. So previously here we were looking on the left-hand side, we looked at the flow list, where we had the list of flow files that are being managed. We also looked at the remote files, where these are the files that you can use as input to those analysis. We also have on the left-hand side something called app list, and it works very, very similarly to the flow list. But in this case, we're not just looking at flows, we're actually looking at these individual apps. Again, I can filter and search on those apps. If I run one of those, let me just run this test report here. This again is running on the server, and what it first of all asks me is to select some time series data files. So this is an app that's been created for creating a summary report, a PDF summary for for test data. So if my job right now is I need to create a PDF file summary, I could go in there, go in the app list, find the app related to creating reports, find the type that I want, start the app, and here I'm just going to pick some data files I'm going to analyze, hit next. It then presents me with a customized page where the author has exposed some things that he gives me the option to change. So for example, I can put my name in here, I can put where I'm located, or where the test was performed. And I've got some options here for how I want to do some rainflow cycle. Well, let's say I just want to carry on to see what the results look like. So I'm going to hit next. It's going to go away on the onto the server and process that data. And it's going to come back with a preview. It's going to show me this histogram. I can look at the results, and I'm going, well, okay, I actually want a from to matrix. So I can jump back to the report parameter page. Let's say I want a from to matrix, and let's say I want 64 bins. in my histogram. Hit next again. Process all that data, show me the result. Okay, that's more what I was looking for, that kind of a histogram display. And I'm going to now say I want to go get the report for that. So I press report. It shows me a PDF file that's been created. It downloads it. I can open that up, and here is the PDF file. It's created as a formatted report. Hasn't just done it for the first channel I picked. It's actually done it for all the channels in that test that I analyzed. And again, here's the from to matrix with the 64 bins, filled in my name and location in the report, and I'm done. So in that way, you're able to take a standardized report, put it in an easy-to-use front end, share it within your organization globally, and standardize how analyses are done. And here's a good example of some of the enhancements we've made in some of the studio reporting recently in terms of some of the PDF exports, graphics that we've incorporated. So that's running an app. You might ask then how you create one of those things. Well, as I mentioned, this is, if I edit that, because I'm the owner of that, if I edit that, we have an app which lays out the different stages in that process. So I can drag and drop these different app components, which are the different sequential steps in the app that's being built. And the part that was we were displaying there is one of this custom page. So here you have these different display items that you can then just drag and drop. So if I wanted to create another item on here, I can literally just drag it onto the page, create a widget that's like a slider, and I can define the properties of that, what the name of it is. Maybe this is a mean stress correction, or whether I want that on or off. And I can then tie that into a property in my GlyphWorks flow. Once that's saved and exposed, when I run my flow, I cancel that. When I run my flow, I can then take the output of that and I have a next stage here, creating reports. And this is the part that actually runs the flow. There's a flow name called measurement report, and here I specify what my inputs are and how they tie into the various parameters that are in the flow. So in that way, I can take a complex flow, but drive it using a simple front end and define that app without having to do any scripting, all with a drag and drop type interface. Okay, so hopefully from that you get some idea of the concept of an engineering app within Aqira that enables you to provide a simple front end on an analysis process. The third item I want to look at today, so we looked at managing analysis processes. We looked at how you could then use Aqira to create an easy-to-use front end, and how an engineer could do that. Doesn't require you to get someone in IT or a developer to write something in C++ or .NET to create one of those interfaces. The third aspect I wanted to look at today is in the area of licensing. An important part of Aqira is that it's based upon what's called Prensia access. So Prensia access, if you're not familiar with it, that is a unified licensing model. It's a token system that enables you to have annual leased access to any combination of both Encode and ReliaSoft desktop applications. So all the products you see listed there, including the Premium Materials database, all those are provided for you using this Prensia access model. And Aqira works together with Prensia access. So again, if you're not familiar with the way the Prensia access works, you have a license server with a certain number of license tokens. And then if you have users in your organization who are running, say, GlyphWorks or DesignLife, then when they run the products, depending on which product options they use, if they're running fundamentals or if they're running, say, design life with a strain life analysis, it's going to draw a certain number of those licensing units. Up to the certain number, up to the maximum that you have available in your license server. When you reach that maximum, the next person who wants to run the software is unable to run it until someone closes their application, puts those units back, and then that can be used by somebody else. So they're then released back to the cache for others to use. So that's how Print-Seer access works, and it's becoming increasingly common and popular for our customer base to use this as a method, because it means that they don't have to pick and choose specifically which product options they need. They can use any of them as and when they need it. So Aqira, that we've talked about there, see it's a web-based option. It's actually installed on premises. So that means it's installed at the customer site, and it goes together with your Print-Seer access license server. So Aqira is, although it's a web-based server product, it's actually installed, again, on premises at the customer site. And as we've seen, you can use Aqira to help manage your flow files, and you can either use it to download it for local use, or, again, we can use it through a browser. You can, if you just have browser access, you can mean that you can run those analysis processes without having to have any local Encode software installed. Now, as I mentioned, you can use then those processes globally. You could use that in an organization that has different locations distributed globally. And one of the benefits of Aqira is that the pricing of those tokens in the license server is still a LAN price. It's still a local pricing for those licenses. Typically, when you have global software, then you pay a follow-the-sun premium on those licenses that can float globally around the world. With Aqira, we don't price it that way. We keep the pricing such that those units are a local pricing, LAN pricing. But what we do is we increase the units only where needed based on the time zone of the user. So that means that only those users who are far from the license server, they see an increased cost just based on the number of license units that are used. In that way, the customer is always ahead in terms of the cost effectiveness of the units compared with having to buy globally priced license units. But there are also other pricing benefits for licensing at version 2018 that I just want to summarize here. So one of the other benefits that you get with Aqira is that if you imagine you have a large pool of license units you're using globally, you're using in different units, you've got a CAE group who are using design life for doing simulations in one department, you've got a proving ground in another part of the world, you've got a test lab somewhere else. There can be a concern about who has access to those units, how many different units are being used. And within Aqira, we have the ability to create what are called license groups, so special groups of users, and then we can allocate to those users a limit, a ceiling on the number of units that that group can use. Or conversely, we can actually set a minimum. In other words, we can reserve units and say these units are always available to this group of users. And if you don't wish to do that, you don't have to do either. You can just have a big pool of units and use them globally. But this way of managing units helps you manage it. So that, for example, you may have a CAE group in Detroit, for example, and they're going to be limited to only using maximum half the number of available units in globally available. Or you may want to make sure that, say, a powertrain group always has access to 2,000 units. Those are the kind of things that you can help use Aqira to do from an IT admin, license admin point of view, manage how those then units are used globally. It's a very attractive feature for a lot of our customers. So as I mentioned, there are also some Aqira benefits for more products at 2018, together with Print-Seer access. One of those is that for design life, the actual token draw per processing thread is reduced from 150 units to just 35 units per processing thread. So bottom line, that means that if you're running a large design life job, that means you can actually more quickly run your analysis by putting more computing power on that design life job, and the number of units required to do that now is a lot less when you're using that in conjunction with Aqira. You don't have to run the jobs web-based. You can still run your design life job desktop or on your HPC machine, but the pricing of the unit draw is reduced. I know some of our customers put a limit on the number of processing threads per job in order to minimize that token draw. So this helps you to really run more large-scale jobs more cost-effectively. Also with Aqira, we have reduced the license draw for XFMEA. So XFMEA is a great product for performing failure modes and effects analysis within an organization. Has a lot of capability around both process FMEA and design FMEA. And so this pricing with Aqira really reflects the fact that for that to be of value within an organization, it has increased value the more people can use the FMEA tools, the more that can be distributed and standardized. And so again, to reflect that, we're making a very significant reduction in the token draw for FMEA together with Aqira pricing. And going along with that, SEP is a web-based portal that is specifically targeted at looking at reliability results using ReliSoft software, and has some great new capabilities specifically around looking at the progress of and statistics of FMEAs, being able to look at the FMEAs themselves over the web to see what already has been done. And so SEP at version 2018 is actually, you're able to use that with no extra cost if you have Aqira. So Aqira and SEP kind of go together. SEP providing a web portal for specifically targeted at some of those reliability focused tasks. And so that's again another benefit of having Aqira. So again, just to summarize, so this is aimed at for you who are less familiar with what the Aqira product is, and really want to give you an overview that Aqira is a web-based product and provides capabilities for managing and sharing analytical processes, creating easy-to-use apps, as we just see, benefiting from some of those licensing advantages, especially where you're using software across multiple locations, multiple time zones, and ability then to more cost-effectively even use an enterprise scale some of these other applications. So the benefits of all that, if we summarized, what benefit is that? It really depends on where you are in the organization. From an engineer's perspective, it really helps you to improve the quality of analysis by being able to standardize, being able to share that with other engineers within your organization, and really prevents you wasting time trying to reinvent processes that are already existed, and help you automate tasks that are repetitive and then can be performed server side. From an engineering manager's perspective, I think the benefits are all around reducing the risk of reliance on a few key individuals by capturing that IP knowledge, taking that to another level, and this concept of democratization and apps. You've now got a platform here which, particularly in the area of around the durability function of Encode, but as you'll see in future releases, you'll see Aqira being extended to broaden that capability of what kind of processes you can encapsulate. Really provides a nice benefit for improved quality of analysis, to get more users be able to perform more analyses. And then from an IT perspective, the ability to run the software globally, you reduce without the global multipliers on the cost, and you're able to manage those license tokens globally as well. So you've got that benefit, and also able to enable interactive web usage of the software, which means that if you don't need to deploy local installs of the software on different users' machines, they can use it over the web as that fits your IT infrastructure.